feedback is a blessing in disguise. So today on our Top Talk series, we have with us Mr. Vineet Mangal. Vineet is the managing partner with BY's Consulting. He is an HR professional with around 25 years of experience in leading and managing HR in MNCs and big corporates throughout the world across services, education, technology, and manufacturing sectors. A very warm welcome to you, Vineet, in our Top Talk interview, and taking out time and sharing with us your insights and perspectives on the topic.
Thank you so much, Dipanita, for giving such a elaborative introduction about me. It's my pleasure to be part of this session because I think you people are doing a great job by bringing this topic more into the center stage where everyone should know about it. We all hear about it, but not very deeply we go into it. So I must compliment you and your team for taking that initiative.
Thank you so much. So, the first thing, Vineet, which I would like to know from you is, like in this scenario, pandemic scenario, where managers and employees are all away from each other, and feedback has become one of the integral part where it is a form of engagement between all the people present in the organization. So in this scenario, how important do you think is to make the feedback process in a formalized way? Have a formalized feedback process.
Sure. See, I think the formal feedback process is absolutely necessary for any organization because unless organization has a very long life. So today you are working with me, tomorrow you are working with somebody, and people come, people go. But if you are in the journey of an organization, if the things are not formalized, then what happens is it starts losing its essence. And something which got recorded, something doesn't get recorded. So over a period of time, it becomes very disjointed kind of information available. So in that sense, formal feedback is important. And we all should make sure that we work something in a manner that it gets recorded. Having said that, one of the very practical problem is because feedback in a formal way is more structured. So when it is structured, you will find that the manager tend to ignore this part of it, because they feel it is very time consuming. They have to do 1, 2, 3, 5, 6 things, and that is going to consume their time. And as a result, they stop giving that feedback. So now the problem we are facing is that the feedback is not coming.
Right.
Forget about a formal feedback, the feedback is not coming. So somewhere we have to come out with the tools and techniques which are far more easy to record the feedback. At the same time, it makes it more formal. Can we say that formal feedback will only prevail and everything else will not be there? The answer will be no. It has to have a blend. So if we wanted to increase the efficacy of feedback, we have to create a blend between a formal feedback and an informal feedback. But formal feedback has to stay, and it will stay for long.
Absolutely. The point which you raised, there should be a balance between formal and informal. Everything cannot be formal, and not if everything gets formal, then it will also lose its essence, right? So yeah, absolutely agree with you. So the next thing, which I would like to know from you is, what are the key features do you think must be present in a feedback process of an organization so that it becomes, engaging for both the managers, the leaders, as well as the employees?
See, I always joke around that we always call it as a feedback. Now the time has come where the people in the organization, especially leaders, have to start thinking about feed forward. So a lot of things have happened on a feedback, but feedback is, in a true sense, it's more of a post-mortem which has happened. Or after an event has already occurred, you are giving a feedback that I may say that, okay, to my manager, to my employee, that 1, 2, 3 things happen, and that is the reason I think you have not done it right or you have done it right. But somewhere we have to gradually inculcate the feeling of looking at feed forward, which is not an easy thing to begin with. But even if we bring 10 or 20% of our feedback as a feed forward, and let me explain you in a short what I mean by feed forward. So feed forward is when you start anticipating or recommending people what should be done without having any past reference to it. So suppose there is somebody who is doing something good in, let's say, HR. Now we say that no, you are doing fabulous in HR, but HR has its own limited traditional way of doing the things. So why don't you start looking into HR analytics part of it? And for that, you are able to do 1, 2, 3 things. So this is something which is a feed forward. So employee also feels that somebody is not looking back and finding out fault or good things in what has happened. They are in with them in the journey for a longer things which has to be achieved. So this is the way I look at it, a feed forward. But to answer your question about what are the key features, see, there are few things which, if we do it right, feedback can be a very good process. And first and foremost is that the intent of the feedback should be very, very clear and pure. If the intent of a manager of an organization is to make sure that employee gets enabled, employee's performance improves, which finally going to improve the performance of the organization as well, then I think nobody is going to doubt anything what he or she is saying to the employee. And most of the time it gets laced with some personal misequations, and we try to use feedback as a mechanism to settle that score. That should be avoided. So it has to be, intent has to be pure and clear. Second most important thing, according to me, is timeliness.
Right.
If you are doing it not on time, it is as good as not doing it at all. Because feedback has its own shelf life. So if that shelf life, you are not able to use that and leverage that, then it is of no use. If I tell my employee after 6 months that you committed mistake X, Y, G on that particular project, it's of no use. It has to be then and there itself. So timeliness is very important. Third important, again, this is some feel that it should be done in a diplomatic way, but I feel it should not be beating around the bush. It should be very, very clear. You should be speaking the subject. You should be giving the feedback on the things which has happened, and do not try to cover it with 4 or 5 or 6 stories around it, because what happens is reality, it confuses the organization and the employees, because there are a lot of information, but what essence of that information should be gets lost. Second is it should be discreet, because I have to understand that I cannot be doing the feedback session for my person in an open. Of course, you can praise people in open, but when it comes to feedback, because it's a two-way, we have to understand that feedback, though we say it's a feedback, but it's a two-way process. Other person also has to participate into it. So it should be done in a manner that it is just not made something like a public forum where you are giving a feedback. It should be a more discreet way of discussing and solving and giving the feedback. Last but not least is that feedback should also have a follow-up mechanism. And this, over the years, when I have worked in many companies, this is one of the biggest problem I have seen, because manager thinks I've given the feedback, my job is over. No, your job has just begun. You have given a feedback, you owe that feedback to an employee, and you have to make sure that whether he or she is acting upon it or not, or are they making the same mistake, is there some course correction that needs to be done. So you cannot just abstain yourself by saying that I have given the feedback, my job is over. And trust me, most of the training program which I do on the feedback and performance management, I make this point very important, that because other 3-4 points everyone knows in bits and pieces, but follow-up part I have not seen many organizations or programs covering about it. So I specifically stress to the managers that you should not say that this is one-time activity. You, once you have given a feedback, take it as a responsibility to do a thorough follow-up. Now, mind you, when I said thorough follow-up, I'm not saying that you should breathe down the neck of an employee. You have to give that space and time to person to improve or see the changes. Sometimes you are not required to say anything. All you have to do is just observe if it is happening or not happening. So if that is done, the follow-up brings miracle. That's the way I look at it. So these are the 4 or 5 things. If we are doing it in an organization, the feedback process can be a very, very effective organization.
That is a great insight, Vineet, you shared, the from feedback to feed forward, and also bringing in the discrete nature of the feedback, like where it should be, since it is a two-way process, it shouldn't be a public on a public forum. Because then, as you mentioned, the purpose, which is the improvement of the person, right? Somewhere they get offended and might happen like this kind of thing. So absolutely agree with you. And when you, as you talked about, making feedback discreet, do you think that bringing in the anonymity in the feedback system, where if a person wants to give feedback anonymously, if that is something which is available in the organization via a tool, will that be, bring about a lot of good things in the system? Do you think so?
See, anonymity in the system, it's a double-edged sword. On one side, it is required because you have to protect the identity of somebody who is giving it, because the relationship, the equation of that person goes for some kind of a strained relationship, especially when it is somebody giving it the feedback about the leaders or about their functional heads. So it has to be protected. But if you ask me, in general, I am not a very great fan of anonymity, because what I feel is it's very easy to put things for others when my skin is not in the game. So I
Right.
can point 5, 10 things about somebody just because my identity is protected, and I can make any random or tall claim about anything. So what it happens is it creates more gossip, and the acceptability in the system is not that great, because you don't know who gave this feedback. So the perspective in which this feedback has been given will never be known to you and to the person for whom this feedback is given. Second is, as I said, some people will try to settle the score by just keeping themselves anonymous and lodging that particular feedback about it. But yes, it cannot be binary. We cannot say that it should not have any anonymity. It should be, if it is there, it has to be at a very, very minimalistic level. As far as possible, it should be non-anonymous, unless it is very, very sensitive and it cannot be done otherwise, then it can be kept as anonymous.
Right. Great views. And the next thing which I would like to ask you, when we talk about negative feedback, negative feedback is often seen in a bad light because people feel offended and all. But there is some use to negative feedback as well in terms of improvement. So I would like to know from you some tips or tricks, you may say, that how negative feedback can be approached in an organization in both the ways, say from employees to managers and from managers to employee, and how to increase its acceptability among the people.
So I'll try to take you back to one of the question I just answered you, is that, see, feedback per se is a feedback. Whether it is a negative or a positive, uh, everything depends upon the intent of the feedback.
Right.
So intent has to be very, very clear, and there should not be any hidden motive behind it. So as long as we are able to bring a culture in the organization, when everyone is going to accept the feedback as a feedback for the betterment of an employee or for the betterment of the organization. So if my subordinate comes and tells me about, give me some feedback about my style of working, I have to understand that from where he or she is coming. Whether the intent is to just put a blame on my style of working, or is it really something which is bothering them and which is not helping them to perform better on the job. So intent has to be very clear. Now, second thing is that how you deal with that feedback. So sometimes, which is very unfortunate, especially in context of the Indian companies I've seen, is that the moment negative feedback comes about an employee, they are reprimanded. They are taken to the task, and we immediately try to punish them by some way or the other. Now, what happens is that anybody who is giving a feedback, if there is a degree of negativity, I'll not say negativity, but something which is not positive, which is not pleasant, people get anxious. They know that something is going to come from HR now against me, or my promotion will be stopped, my increment will not be there, or just that they are building a case for me to get fired after some time. So if I have to answer this in one way, if company really wanted to use negative feedback also in a constructive manner, the intent of the feedback should be told to everyone that purpose is far larger than only people. The purpose is to make people align with the organization's performance, and they should add to the performance of the organization. Also, one of the way I look at it is that if I have to give a negative feedback to somebody, which of course many times I have to do. So by the way, let me also share it with you that it will be important also that I'm also ICF trained coach. So I have decided to pick performance coaching as one of my main area.
Great.
So not only for organization, but I do performance coaching for individuals also and the leaders also. So as a part of performance coaching, a lot of time I have to give feedback, and feedback at times have negative angle also attached to it. So I'll not say I have mastered that, but one of the best practice, the way I do this is that I try to separate the wheat from the chaff. I always try to separate news from the noise, so that when I'm talking to you, I will not bring any element of your personal angle or a personality angle into it. I'll stick myself to the subject, so that you should also feel that comfort that he is talking about a subject, not about the subject holder. And you again, even if you have to go that extra mile in bringing that atmosphere where the person is comfortable in receiving the feedback. I can share it, the examples like this. Sometimes positive feedback given on a casual manner is taken badly by the employees. And sometimes I have given feedback by sitting across the table, spending half an hour with them. Even the negative feedback ultimately turns out to be in a very constructive manner. So the manner in which you approach, the kind of environment which you give to an individual, the space which individual requires to listen and absorb is very, very important. And always try to separate the issue from the person. As much as possible, try to separate that. I think the success lies in that.
Great views, Vineet. Separating the individual from the issue, as you mentioned, is so important, because often people find it very as an attack on the personal basis, right? So it is very important to coach them, to teach them how to not link those two. So great views. So the last thing, Vineet, which I would like to ask you is, what are the key questions, according to you, that an organization must ask its employees to get a constructive feedback or an honest feedback about itself?
Okay, so you are basically talking about employee surveys or knowing about the culture of the organization, how the employees should give their feedback.
Right.
How they're comfortable, what they're liking, what they are not liking, right? That's the question.
Right, their position, like at what position they're standing in from the employee's perspective.
I think, according to me, there are 4 or 5 things which we must make sure that before we walk on that path of collecting the feedback from employee. Because see, collecting of the feedback is a responsibility, and you have to be well planned for it. It cannot be sporadic that I'll come and say that, okay, come here, tell me about the company, and you are going to say about it. It's not that. You have to make it much more thoughtful, much more scientific and systematic in doing that. So to my mind, the first thing in this is the confidentiality part of it. That when somebody is giving you information, sharing the information, how you are keeping that as a confidential. If Dipanite is coming and telling me about, let's say, about the work culture of an organization, and tomorrow I go and tell HR that Dipanita always have a problem with the culture of an organization, then it is not a feedback. It is something you are disclosing about her, which she gave you in a good confidence. She gave it with an intent which you should have respected. So confidentiality is one part which has to be maintained. Second important is, in fact, it is much more important than the confidentiality is, that it should not have any judgment or prejudice thereafter.
Right.
So, not that somebody spoke low about me or about the organization, I'll try to put these guys or the team in a red flag. That because they have said this, let me try to find faults in them and let me try to get rid of them over a period of time. So that what will happen is that when your people starts giving you the feedback, so there is a saying, I'm not too sure whether I can recollect that, but the intent of the saying is that organizations should be worried when their sincere people start becoming silent.
Right.
So when sincere people become silent, it means they are not willing to speak their mind. And most of the time, people keep that as an option of not speaking when they know that it can be used against them in some way or the other.
Right.
So we should not carry any prejudice, or we should not become a judgmental about what feedback we got it. Let's take it as a feedback, work on it if required, get further clarification if needed, but work on it. Don't try to label individuals on what they're doing. Third important thing, which I think I've said it earlier also, intent and purpose has to be clearly explained. You have to go that extra mile in explaining the purpose to the employees, that why you are doing this, why you want to know about it. So I know that there is an intent, there is a purpose. I will give my feedback. If I don't know, most of them would be very confused at whether they should share, they should not share. Last but not the least, and it is in fact the most important out of the everything other things we have spoken, is when you get the feedback, act upon it. Don't keep it in your closed cupboards after you get the feedback. So if feedback is of no value, as I said, feedback has a shelf life. So if you collect everything and then after that, if you are not going to act on it, next time when you go to employees, they are not going to share, because they know that it doesn't make any kind of a difference to the organization. They just wanted to know, but they never wanted to change. So you have to act upon it. That should be the closed looping that should happen in the feedback.
Great. Great insights shared, Vineet. All the things which you shared, making clear the intent and the purpose of the feedback, to making, feedback a continuous process, following up with feedback. And in terms of negative feedback, trying to build a better culture in the organization so that the acceptability increases. Every other thing which you shared is like, it was a great knowledge addition to my knowledge, as well as I think all the viewers who will be seeing this will be equally enriched with it. So thank you so much for your time.
Just wanted to add one more thing to it. I think we have created a lot of, as an industry, a lot of misconception is about the feedback.
Right.
If you ask me, giving feedback is a very, very simple thing. All you need is a fluid intelligence for that. It doesn't require a degree or a diploma or a very thorough training program for that. All you have to do is be aware about the environment and do it in a right way. So if I have to compare giving feedback, it's like preparing a dish. When you are preparing a dish, of course, recipe is important,
Right.
which is the content. So I have a feedback about you, that's a content. But will that make it a dish? Not necessarily. So dish requires a sequence of things which you have to follow in a recipe. The kind of things you are going to do, the environment in which you are going to do it, how you are going to follow the sequence, how much you are observing what is happening. Only then you can come out with a dish. Just saying that I have a recipe doesn't mean you are going to be a good cook in producing something. Same is the case with the feedback. Just that because you have the information or a content to tell somebody doesn't mean that you are going to do it in a manner which is going to be constructive for an employee as well as for an organization. So just make sure that you become aware, wear the hat of a chef, do it in a much more articulative manner with all the sensitivities which is required to be done. I'm sure feedback can be a very good dish for the organization and for an employee.
Great, great. It was the, putting it in the most simplest form and the most useful form. It was great. Thank you so much, Vineet, for your time.
Thank you so much. I think it was really the very relevant questions you have asked because these are some of the challenges which we every day see. But unfortunately, we tend to either ignore them or we have a very less information how to handle these kind of situations. So I'm really glad that very thoughtfully you and your team have prepared these questions, which are quite relevant in today's environment, especially during this Corona time when people are sitting away from the office and a lot of things are happening online. So this is very, very important. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much for your time, Vineet.